Hi everybody, it's Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the May Shimmerz Paints Color Kitz collection. For this layout, I am using triangles. I use a Waffle Flower die, and this triangle has kind of like a serrated edge, like a postage stamp has. So I thought that was kind of cool. So I cut out a whole bunch of them from some white cardstock, and then also from 3 different patterns of the pattern paper in the May collection. So I layered, I believe, 3 of the white triangles on top of each other. It was a very thin paper, like an 80-pound paper. And then I have the pattern paper that's going to go on top. So there were 3 different colors of triangles. I have the yellow ones, the light blue ones, and the dark blue ones. And I really like this color combination. However, since I wasn't at home, I was at a crop, and it's a weekend crop that's probably about 2 hours away from my home. I realized I did not have all of the colors of ink that I needed. I was able to borrow this fossilized amber from one of my friends, but I didn't have a matching dauber. So I tried to rub the color on with the ink pad, and I wanted to be careful because I didn't want to ruin my friend's ink pad. But it just didn't have the same effect as the dauber. So I had my Stormy Sky Distress Oxide and the dauber that went along with it, and that inking went a lot better. And then for the dark blue, I just left that as is. I didn't have an ink to go along with it, and it looks just fine. So I really only inked the light blue ones the way I'm used to. So I was thinking of a couple of different ideas. I finally decided to simply have a line of triangles going through the center of the page. So I'm going to add those in a little while, but first I wanted to create a mixed media background. The piece of paper that I'm working on is a smooth white piece of 120-pound cardstock, and I covered it with some Liquitex gesso. And now I'm using a piece of plastic, and I'm adding some of the Inklingz Bahama Mama color to the plastic, and then adding a good deal of water, and that's to help to spread the color around. Now, I go to these scrapbooking weekends with my scrappy friends about 3 times a year. And sometimes when I go to them, I found that I feel a lot of pressure and I haven't really been that productive. But I found that this time I just was in the mood to scrapbook, and I felt really good about getting a number of layouts completed. So that's always a good feeling. The Waffle Flower die that I used to cut all of these triangles out was on the table where people were selling their stash that they didn't want anymore. And as soon as I saw that triangle, I just knew that I wanted to make a background with triangles. So it was kind of cool to get that inspiration right on the spot. And it was really funny because when I was cutting out all these triangles, I had just one die to use. And I had cut out a lot of triangles. I was thinking how I wish I had another one so I could cut out 2 triangles at once. And then when I was all done with this layout, I found that a different person was selling the same die. So I ended up picking that up too, just for the future. So I picked up the 2 dies for a total of $3, and I really, really like this triangle. I just think it's kind of cool, and I'm sure that I'll think of other uses for it. Here I'm building up the color. I started to use a little bit less water because I wanted the color to be a little bit darker. This color is going to be behind all the triangles, so you're just going to see little bits of it kind of peeking out from the areas in between the triangles, and then a little bit above and a little bit below. But I still wanted it to be a rich color, so that's why I am going in several times and adding several layers of the color. I tried one of the triangles on top, and I thought I could probably have a little bit more color on this, so I went back in again and added even a little bit more. And I really like the way this Bahama Mama color goes so nicely with those navy blue triangles. There are little flowers on those triangles that are the same color as the background, so I thought that would help to tie everything together. I always feel bad about getting paint on the tablecloths that they have covering the tables. I was told that it was okay, but I always forget that I'm working on a tablecloth. When I work at home, my tabletop is glass, which is probably the best thing I ever did because I do tend to get my mixed media products all over the place, and glass is really super easy to clean up. But not true of the tablecloths. So by the end of the weekend, it was looking kind of pink, but I was told it was fine. So hopefully they were able to get the color out because I am rather messy. So I wanted to add some splatters. So I thought I would add another color of pink, but I didn't want to add just that color. I wanted to mix it together with the Bahama Mama color. So I use a Shimmerz called Pip Pip Cherry-O. I love the names of these colors. And I mixed those two together, and then I splattered that mixture on the background. And then since I had some of the color left over, I thought, let me add that color in there. And that just added another little bit of a darker pink to the background. So I'm not going to show you this whole process of me adding the triangles. I will say that I use my T-square regularly because I wanted to make sure that everything was lined up. And even then, I feel like there are some little irregularities to the way that I lined up the triangles. But I think that the distance between them is even enough that it looks okay. It's definitely not perfect. So I use ATG adhesive to attach them down. First, I put the center row down, and then I put some triangles on the top, and then later on I put some more on the bottom. And I did use a pattern. First, I had a yellow, then a dark blue, then a light blue, and then I just repeated that pattern, but I varied the placement so that the colors would all be spread out throughout my little area of triangles. And then after I had laid out all my triangles, I realized that there were a few spots where I had to fill in with some half triangles. So I had to do a little bit more die cutting for some of them. And then I filled those areas in, and then I'm going to use my scissors and clip off all of the extra. Now I'm working on a mat for my photo. I have a photo of both of my daughters. It's actually a favorite photo of mine. I've already scrapbooked it once for my older daughter, and now I'm making a page for my younger daughter. And I wanted there to be a blue background behind the photo. I have it mounted on some white cardstock. You'll see in a moment. But I thought that it would look nice if there was a blue border around it. I thought that that would help it to kind of pop off of all those triangles. So I'm using a Creameez called Lapis Dance, and I'm building up the color all the way around the edge. Of course, you're only going to see the edge because the photo will be in the center. So I continued adding the layers until I felt like it looked the darkness that I wanted it to be. You're just going to see a small hint of this color around the outside. It's not a very big mat. And then after I was done painting my mat, I set it aside to dry. And now I am using a number of the elements from the kit. So the flowers are fussy cut from one of the beautiful pattern papers. As soon as I saw these flowers, I knew I was going to fussy cut them out. There were some larger flowers and some tiny flowers. And then I also wanted to use a banner that was in the ephemera pack and a few other little doodads that you'll see in a while, with one of them being a butterfly. So after the color dried, I thought that I could use a little bit more just to make the color a little bit darker. I always feel like around the photo, you want to have the most prominent color on the layout so that your eye will be drawn to the photo. And I think sometimes that could be the darker colors. So I wanted to make the color a little bit darker. And now I'm adding some adhesive to the back of my photo and attaching it down to the mat. And I was really happy with the way that that color turned out. So I have my photo positioned all the way on the left, and I'm going to use a little bit of foam to pop it up. I'm just popping up the bottom part because the photo is sitting on top of those triangles, which have a little bit of dimension to them. So this will just help the photo to sit correctly on the page without sagging on the bottom. And now I'm bringing those flowers onto the page. I'm going to have a couple of different clusters. I have a flower cluster on the lower right-hand side of my photo, on the upper left-hand side, and I'm going to put another cluster in the upper right-hand corner of the layout. And then my title is going to go in the lower right-hand corner. I'm incorporating that banner die into my title. One of the things I really liked about fussy cutting out this particular sheet of paper was that there were a whole bunch of different flowers in different sizes. There were flowers that were similar to that Bahama Mama color in a couple of different varieties. And then there were also some teeny tiny little flowers in both pink and yellow. And then there are also some bunches of yellow flowers. I'll be bringing those in a little while. So there were a lot of different types of flowers on that one sheet, and I always like to create clusters with different sizes of flowers. For me, it's much more challenging to create clusters if all of the flowers are the same size than it is to have some smaller ones and larger ones. So my thought was that I was going to put the title on the banner, and I knew that the word girls would fit on there, but I did not have any letters that would fit on the banner. So I went to the handy secondhand table and I found that somebody was selling a big kind of mystery box of letters. And I thought, well, for $5, I'll just grab this. Hopefully there'll be something I could use in there. Well, when I opened the box, it was just absolutely jam-packed with tons and tons and tons of different letters in all different colors. So I was really not surprised that there was a set of letters in there that was the exact same color as the dark blue. There were just so many different letters in there. So I spelled out the word girls. And then if you look really carefully to the left-hand side of my layout, there are some little kind of mustard color letters, and I had spelled out the word sweet. Long ago, I got a tip from a YouTuber, and I don't remember who it was, who recommended when you're using those little rectangular letters to stick them down to a strip of paper before trying to attach them to your page. So that's what I did. I don't know if you could see it. I spelled out the word sweet, and I did that by attaching them or sticking them down to a little piece of cardstock. And then I'm going to position that on top of the banner so it will spell out Sweet Girls. So I continued attaching down the flowers, and you could see that I added a whole bunch of smaller flowers kind of around the edges of all three of the clusters. And then in the May kit, there's a huge sticker sheet. It had so many stickers on it, and I was really happy to see that there were some butterflies. So I picked out a couple of butterflies. I have one in the upper left-hand corner, and then I have another butterfly in the lower right-hand corner, right on top of my title. And then I am also going to be using another butterfly, but I think I might have fussy cut that one out, or maybe it was one of the ones from the ephemera pack. On the cluster that's at the bottom of the page, I have some yellow, kind of like sprigs sticking out of it. I don't end up leaving those there. I decided that I was going to use some other yellow flowers that were fussy cut from that same page. First, though, I am adding some photo corners. So again, I'm using the pattern paper, and I'm attaching those photo corners down in all four corners. I thought that yellow would be a good color to use around the photo. And then I see that I have the butterfly on the lower left-hand side of my photo, but it isn't going to stay there. I'm going to move it to the right of the photo. So at this point, I have most of the embellishments attached down, and I was thinking that I should probably trim off those flowers at the top of the page. I can't tell you how often I forget to trim off items that are kind of hanging over the edge of the paper like that, and then months later I will attempt to put them in a sleeve protector and realize that I have to trim them back before they're going to fit nicely into my albums. So now I'm adding those yellow flowers that I mentioned. Like I said, fussy cut these out from that same pattern paper that I cut all the flowers from. And I think that these are just the right kind of flower to kind of finish off a floral cluster. Just adds a nice little element to have these very tiny flowers added in there. So I'm adding a few pearls to the layout. I add some pearls to each of the four photo corners, and then I also add some smaller pearls to the centers of those tiny flowers that I have in all of the clusters. I realized that I did not have any like tiny individual pearls with me, but I did have these strips of pearls, so I just place the pearl down and then cut the rest of the strip off and continue that all around the layout. And although it probably doesn't make a huge difference, it's just a little detail, I wanted to have a different size pearl on the photo corners than the ones that are on the flowers. I just think that that adds a nice little touch. I don't know, that's just the way that I look at it. I like to have some variation in the size of embellishments I use, especially when it's the exact same embellishment. And then as a final touch, I picked out a sentiment from that same sticker sheet. It says, "I love you so much." And I thought that was a great way to complete this layout. And here are some close-ups. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun making it, and I really love that triangle shape along with the pattern papers. If you are interested, you can check out the link in the description box to the Shimmerz shop. You can check out this month's kit. You can also check out all of the great paints and other products that Shimmerz Paints has available on their website. And I want to say thank you again to everybody who's watching this video, especially that you stayed all the way to the end. I really appreciate your views and your likes and your lovely comments. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.